Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're new to this channel, my name is Evelyn Wetheramula, and I'm a psychologist. If you haven't subscribed yet, then pause this video and do that now so that you don't miss out on future videos that I post. Today, I have a really special guest. Imagine this. You have a really good life. You have a good job, a well-paying job, good work colleagues, good working conditions. Basically, because of that job, your life standards are well above average. You have a good relationship to your boyfriend, a boyfriend who loves you. You have a family that cares for you. And then one day, you wake up and you have excruciating stomach pain. You go to the doctors, they run a few tests, and they come back to you and tell you you have pancreatic cancer and you have 6 months to live. That is exactly what happened to my next guest, Joan Muturi. Join me in the conversation with her as she shares how that experience turned her whole life upside down and changed it for the better. Yes, you heard me right. It changed her life for the better. And how it helped her to find out what her life purpose is. And moreover, help other women lead a purpose-driven life. Joan, thank you so much for coming today to speak to us. Thank you for taking your time to come and share your story with me and my viewers. In your story, so I listened into your podcast. I've just told you this. Joan has a really great podcast, by the way. You can check that out. You talk about the way you had this diagnosis and you were given 6 months to live. So yes. Most of us don't experience anything like that. So we don't know how it feels like to actually get such a diagnosis and to be told that you might die or you're going to die, in fact. How did you feel? What kind of thoughts were you having? Just explain to us or tell us a bit about what's going on with you in that moment when you got that diagnosis and when you were going through all that.
Yeah. So the first thing I would want to say is that when somebody gets a diagnosis, nobody ever expects it. So nobody ever sits there waiting to get a diagnosis or anything like that. So it's when it actually happens that you realize whatever reaction would be. So reactions vary. Mm-hmm. So in my case, I am a survivor. I think that's how God has created me. So the first thing that hit my head was, how am I going to get through this? Not that it was for me, it wasn't like I'm sick. It was like, what do I need to do to get out of this? Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Because instinctively, my mind didn't go into that mode of death. It went to, how do I need to get right through this? How do I need to put myself in a place that I'm not going to succumb to it? Like, I can't even explain it. It's like something in me took over. Mm-hmm. That I just felt an instinct that I need to fight. That I need to, I don't want to accept this as it. And for me, most people say that what brushes through their mind through such moments is the fear around, I'm dying. All that. For me, what came to my mind is, what do I need to get done? Because there are things that need to get done and I'm not dying. So it really jolted me up. It really jolted me up to the realization that, I've been given this, but I'm not taking it. But even if it was to happen, which I'm not accepting still, what needs to happen? What do I need to do? How do I need to get moving?
Do you mean in terms of like, what do I need to do in terms of like treatment and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of treatment, in terms of getting the right support alongside me, in terms of putting myself in that space to get better. That's what I mean. Yeah. Like, what are the actions? Because most people will succumb to the to the diagnosis. Like
Yeah.
you've been told this is it. But for me, I'm like, okay, are there options? Are there different types of treatment? Can I get a second opinion? Can I get a third opinion? In the meantime, what needs to change in terms of my diet? What do I need to start doing in terms of my mind? Prepare, I had to put myself in that. But I want to tell you this, that the doctors don't give you that. They may give you options, but you really need to be in a space where you don't get into the emotions of the disease, because it's very easy to get very emotional and sucked up into that, the energy of whatever is happening.
Yeah.
And now when I look back at it, I was not a coach. And we're going to talk about that. I didn't know any of that. But now, when I look back, I literally see that God was preparing me for what I'm doing right now. Because I'm like, how did I put myself into the right beliefs? How did I put myself into the right vibrations, even without knowing that such things existed?
Do you think it has to do with the personality thing? Is it your personality? You mentioned God, or is it something to do with faith, or both? Like, is it a spiritual thing that or God did something in you, like you're saying, that you ended up like not succumbing to that, or having like going into that downward spiral? Or is it a personality thing? There's some people who tend to be more optimistic even in very pessimistic situations or very negative situations. Are you that kind of person who's more optimistic in life, or what would you say? Has it got to do with your faith, or both?
Okay, yeah, I'll respond to that. So first and foremost, my faith was severely tested at that time. I cannot talk about faith at that time, because at the time my faith was really hit. And that time I was not where I am spiritually, to be honest. Like, I'm at a much different level than I was at that time. I still was with, very tight like this with God. But when such a thing happens, you question many things. So I wouldn't say that, like, I was like, God, you're going to take me through this. And I literally clung to him in that sense. But I think for me, it's a wiring. I do 100% think there's something to do with personality there, 100%. Because I remember my friend getting diagnosed with cancer, and I believe I shared it in my podcast. If not, it's a story I'd want to share at some point. And she's a very dear friend of mine. And literally, and this was long before, a couple of years or so before me. And like, you would have thought it was me. I'm like, you have to fight. You have to fight. I would literally sit and, at her feet and tell her, you cannot cave into this. You can't allow this to take you down. And she would repeatedly tell me, Joan, for me, I know I'm going to, she would tell me she's going to die. And I would tell her, no, you're not going to. You have to believe that you're going to get better. And the words of her mouth came to pass. So when I got the report, I knew she had already accepted the report. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
She had accepted it. She had taken it. She kept reminding me every time I would see her. She was a very dear friend of mine, so I would see her very often, especially as she got worse. And she'd tell me, these are my final days. These are my, like that. And I'm refusing. I'm telling her, don't tell me. She's like, what do you mean don't tell? I'm telling you, spend this time with me, because it's there. You won't be with me much longer. And it became what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, when it came to my time, I didn't even remember about my friend's story, because now it's me. In fact, it's much later I remembered. And I'm like, I now see how personality and how people react in different situations. Because I've realized that even in my career, things would happen that, would make people feel like they're going to call, like something big happens within the organization, a huge change. And I would not be flustered. I'd be like, it is what it is, guys. Let's move on. Let's see how to get to the other side. So I think generally my personality trait, and I think it's about personality, is one that is more around looking for solutions rather than digging deeper into the problem. So for me, I'm like, how can we solve this? And it's so funny because it manifests in every area. I find it in my marriage. I find it with my clients. My client tells me I put out content that nobody's looking. I'm like, like, let's go to the root. Where did you circulate it? What did you do? So I'm very quick to look for solutions. And I think that's a personality type, Evelyn.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I think our mindset is very important. Obviously, there's those people who it's given to them biologically, but that doesn't mean that even others can't learn that. I think even people who maybe tend to be more pessimistic, or they might call themselves realistic, they can also learn to be optimistic, or to not just focus on the negative, to even try and see, okay, how can we progress in this situation? What needs to be done? What is even the good in this situation, maybe, and just look at what could be achieved so that the situation can get better. Definitely, I agree with that. And I also like the way you say it, but maybe also it has also something to do with revelation. Like you said, there was an instinctive thing that told you, no, Joanne, your time is not yet here. And it could be that your friend, maybe she had the same instinct, but that has told her your time is up. It could also be that, you never know.
You never know.
But I understand what you're trying to say. You might fall into things that we don't want, as what we profess can actually sometimes come to pass. So we have to be very careful what we're professing of ourselves.
Yes. And, and now that you brought me back to my friend's situation, let me tell you, I did not have a moment to listen to those things she was telling me. She says one thing I would speak about life. You know what I mean? She says that, I'm like, no, I'm calling life forth. But you tell me, Joanne, I know what I'm feeling, and I feel that I'm probably better off, not being here anymore. And it was very hard for me to accept. However, back to myself, I think you are right, Evelyn. That revelation that comes from really seeking God from a pure place.
Yeah.
And for me, the pure place was, this is the situation. From the doctor's perspective, from my perspective, it looks dire. When they found the tumor, it was a 13-centimeter tumor. And pancreas, nobody survived, truly.
I know. It's like the worst cancer you can have.
It's the worst. So the prognosis, looking at it from the human eyes, it didn't make sense how even now, my doctor calls me his valiant warrior up to now. My doctor is one of my doctors are still very close to me. I can truly tell you for a fact that if I was to go through such a situation again, I don't know how it would be.
Yeah.
God forbid, but in my head, I just feel like every step of the way God was present. Every decision I was making, he was my ever-present help in times of need.
But going back to right after that situation, so you had operations, many treatments, chemotherapy, and at some point you were doing so well that you could go back to work. And while you were at work, you felt this discontentment that you couldn't shake off. You knew, like, okay, yes, this is a good job. I'm getting well paid at the UN. I have a good position and everything, but I'm not living out my full potential. And you couldn't just quite point it out. But then you went through a process of figuring that out, and which has led you to becoming a life coach. And you've been doing that for 5 years now. But going back, so there might be people who are watching this who are in a similar situation in terms of they're in a job, which is a comfortable job. They're well paid, they're leading a good life, but they feel this discontentment that you felt back then. What would you say to these people that they could do to find out what their purpose is? So what did you do? What are 3 things that you did that were key for you finding out, that enabled you to find out your purpose, your life purpose? What are 3 important things that you do, that you did, sorry?
So I want to take a step back. So when I came back to work, I had a really good job. So my job was very fulfilling in so many ways. However, I had been feeling a sense of, there's more. But after I went back this time being sick, after the sickness, something had changed in me. Something shifted. It's like the realization that your life can go like this had now become I can explain, multiplied times a million. So the day I went back to my office the first time, I remember going in and finding like 100 get well cards on my desk, and I sat down and I'm like, something has shifted. The woman who walked out of this office is not the woman who has come back. So I must say that my discomfort was now deeply aggravated. Like I could literally feel like my spirit was disturbed. It was stirred into another. Like I literally felt like I had started to zone out, which had never happened. So before, I had the discomfort, which I mean, I could just chase it away and be like, after all, I have a good job. Now, this one, I could not shake off. It's like the moment I entered that office, I'm like, something has changed. Something has shifted. I can't be here much longer. And that's the place of discomfort I want to speak about right now. Because I know many people who are in that state, but they stifle it. And inside, it's like a fire that is being contained inside you, and you're trying to quench it. But the more you're trying to quench it, the more it feels like it wants to be released.
Yeah, the bigger it gets.
The bigger it gets. And you can imagine it's contained within you. So you can imagine how that feels. Yeah. It's like you're compressed and crushed into something that you're not. So in short, you're not truly being in full authenticity with what you'd want for your life. So for me, I think the first place was, now that I've come out of this situation, let me be honest with myself. Can I continue with this much further? Was my starting point. And the answer was no. And now that the answer is no, what next? It was to go into a place of stillness and introspection. A place where, I just really had to sit with my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. Most people have the tendency to think that feelings are just feelings of joy, sadness. For me, I had to sit with every single emotion and feeling that was coming through me. Like, I had to distinctly name it for what it is. Number 1, discomfort. Number 2, fear. Number 3, shock. Number 4, whatever. Like, I had to really, and for me, what came out was, this is a season that's ending. And that for me was very uncomfortable because I had been in that job for 13 years. Going on 14. So I had reached the top level in my area. And I'm like, I don't know anything else. So you can imagine what that started me. So the introspection, the stillness and the introspection was the first thing. The second thing for me was to really, really talk to God about it. And now I'm like, okay, I'm healed. Here I am. Something has shifted. I don't know what it is. God help me. So the stillness and the introspection was for me. Then now the spiritual angle, where I'm now going, seeking God. Does that make sense? So and the one where I'm going like, to God, please, now that I'm getting these revelations from the stillness and the introspection, please, can you help remove any skills from my eyes, anything that you need me to release, please take it off. And then the third thing for me was visualization and journaling. I'm a journaler. I write everything that comes to my head. And I would sit and I didn't know it's called journaling at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but I had these little notebooks that I would write what I'm feeling. I would go to the car during my lunch break and I sit and just write, what it is. And I could feel myself like, every time I wrote it, it's like one of my clients, who is a book writer, author, she says bleeding on paper. I literally would bleed on paper. Everything that I was feeling, I'll document it. And the more I released it from my spirit, because remember, a lot of these things I could not share with anybody because I had to normal people or to the regular person. I was there. So how can you tell somebody God has healed you? These are the people who have paid
you. Have a good job. You have a good
and
life.
They're the ones who have paid my medical insurance and helped me get the best doctors and the best treatment in the world. And then now I'm telling them, oh, it's no longer for me.
Yeah, like, I feel discomfort. I'm discontent.
Like you tell me, people look like she has gone crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of these processes, I had to deal with them myself.
Yeah.
I had to deal with this myself. And then during this process, now those three things, now it's when I bled on paper, because you ask yourself, okay, it's what next? What do you feel? And you really go deep. And it came out to me that I have to give myself a transition period. And literally, of course, we'll get to talk about this, is what I realized, that I really help women really transition well from one place to where it is that they desire to be.
Yeah.
And I really have to have a transition time. So I made the decision to give my employer, I gave myself a target of one year to sort of try and figure it out, what I want, about my resignation. But obviously you don't say a year in advance that you're resigning, but I did the mental resignation and I put it in my journal.
Okay.
That come November, the 2015, I would be tendering in my resignation. And that's another thing, write the vision and make it plain on paper. That's what the visualization. I had to put a date to it. Otherwise it's just an idea. It's just a thought. Yeah.
So we'll talk about that transition time in a bit, but then I also want to add to that what you said about journaling, because I love that. I do that myself as well, and I've done it since I was a teenager, actually. And I'm not that kind of person who loves writing. I'm not that kind of person, but I found that is a way of like just being honest with myself, because sometimes we are not even honest with ourselves, and just being honest, like, and naming like what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. And, just that is the best way to reflect, I find. And just, I've found that when I'm going through a difficult situation, just naming stuff is so powerful, because it helps me to then know, okay, so this is what I need to do then. And like you said, our emotions are so complex. They're so complex and so different. So there's a variety of them. And if you just think, I feel sad or I'm happy, that does not necessarily name discontentment, or, and being able to identify what is it exactly that I feel is so powerful if we want to, lead that kind of life that is the kind of life that we want, actually, otherwise Absolutely. You just have these emotions and you can't name them and you're not really changing anything. And that is why journaling, I would really, encourage everyone who's watching this to try it, or to just write things down, and so that you can be able to just air your soul, I would say, or like you're saying, bleeding on paper, because that is so important for even our psychological health, actually.